Hi, this video is going to be about installing a thumb safety into a 1911 or 2011 style gun. One of my shooting friends has borrowed one of my guns to shoot and then use as a prop gun down at Battle Springs Ranch. And the EGW thumb safeties I installed in it that fit me just well are in a position that they don't fit his hands, which probably have wider palms than mine. So what happens is that on the right side of the gun, his knuckle actually pushes up on that Ambi safety lever. So he's ordered some Atlas safeties, which have the levers straight in relation to the shield, where almost all the rest have some kind of a curve or angle to them, because people have curved hands and fingers. So the beauty, though, of the Atlas safety is that it has no interference with the frame in terms of fitting, and fits every hand shape. I just don't really use them myself because the position of my thumbs becomes quite unnatural. So that's the backstory here. I'm going to use a single-sided safety for most of my talk here. So the first thing that you want to do is have a bare frame. No fire control. You can have the trigger in it, mag catch, grip, all that crap. Doesn't really matter. What you don't want is the fire control, because the fire control is what your safety lobe interferes with to make the gun safe. So your stripped frame or empty frame and your safety, you want to put them together initially and make sure that it moves freely all the way up and all the way down. There are frequently problems where you've got a burr on the inside of the frame or in the groove of the safety lobe itself that causes some interference. And if you have that happening and you're not aware of it and you just begin filing away material from the fitting pad, then you can get to a point where you are really frustrated, you've spent a lot of time on it, and the safety is just really not making any progress. And then typically at that point you do a deep dive, find the burr, remove it, and then find that your safety is a piece of garbage because you've used too much time removing too much material for a solution to an entirely different problem. So I'm going to make sure there are no burrs to remove. If there are any binding, you free that up, and then you can begin the process of fitting the safety. So you want to have the fire control in the gun. All right, sear spring. So the sear spring is going to put tension on the sear. This left leaf here pushes on the sear in there. Probably don't have light where you can see it, but it is right there. So it's touching the sear legs, pushing it into its home position, if you want to call it that. Then you're going to need the mainspring housing pushed in. The mainspring housing actually pushes down on the sear spring and pushes it flat. And so that puts tension on it, puts it in its normal position. And now you've got a sear that is ready to have things fit to it. On your brand new safety, this one's already been fitted, so I'm not going to remove material. On the side of it, you can see a black mark. So I put a black mark there on fitting a blind safety, with no reference. If I've got a gun that's already had a safety in it, I'll just measure the fitting pad using my 10/8 block and some calipers or a depth gauge. And then that gives me a cut to dimension that I can approach and then finish it off by test fitting. So we're going to pretend like this is a new safety and we don't have anything to copy. So you put it in and it will typically stop about there because it is hitting the side of the sear and cannot go any further because the fitting pad is way too long. So once it gets to that point and it's stopped, you push down on it, wiggle it, and let that Sharpie mark rub against the sear, pull it out. Then you'll have a shiny spot on the side, and that is your reference point. So you can begin removing material from the fitting pad to go toward that reference point and shorten it down. Most of the time, it's not a whole lot of material. Sometimes it is a lot. There are many different manufacturers of thumb safeties. There are many qualities of thumb safeties. Some have this pad built way up and you have to hog off kind of an incredible amount of material. And then some are really pretty close, where you're taking off maybe 10, 15 thousandths, maybe a little less sometimes, and you're home. So once you get that shiny mark on the side, you're going to go ahead and put a Sharpie mark across the fitting pad. I don't know if you can see that, but this part is the fitting pad. You can see it right there. It sticks up. This little sort of L-shaped shape. It's the bottom leg of the L that would be horizontal on a piece of paper if you drew it. So then now you can begin removing material. So you'll use the shiny mark on the side kind of as a guide point. Remove some material. You can use files, stones, doesn't really matter. Stones tend to be flat and remove material in a more true fashion than files, which if you put any deflection on it with your hand, or if you've got this at an angle, then you can have it dig in on one side or the other, and you'll cut a crooked line. That isn't the biggest deal. You just watch your cut. You know, you're removing the Sharpie mark as you cut. So if you see it being unequal, then equalize it out, right? Remove more material from the part that needs it, and then Sharpie it up again, and file it or stone it again. You will be doing that in sequence with test fitting it to the gun over and over and over, if you haven't done this before. However, that shiny mark that you put on the side is going to be your ultimate guide, right? So at a certain point, you'll have enough material removed where it sits in flush, but it will not sweep up because you need to remove more material. This safety lobe moves in an arc, so it'll be sweeping like that into position, right? Rotating into position. So keep that in mind. So if you go too far, then it will just sweep right past the surface it's supposed to stop at, and now you have, you know, $100 piece of garbage. If you are a welder, you can actually weld that back up and recut it. You really need to be pretty good at that because you don't want to put too much heat into the part and anneal it and make it a soft piece of garbage. So best to do it just in one fell swoop. So you'll remove some material, test fit, and as you remove material and test fit, you'll be able to get it to lift up a bit, a little bit more the next time, a little bit more the next time, and you'll progressively go up until it's in its safe position, at which point this line here, this side of it, will touch the notch in the slide that's cut out for your thumb safety. It will touch this back side here, this line here. It will also clear the plunger that sticks out of there. That will be below that point. That point needs to be above the plunger. If it's not, then the plunger will always have tension on it and your safety will be too easy to sweep off. You want it to be in a position where that plunger protrudes underneath that point and you actually have to put effort into sweeping it off. That way, I mean, this is the only safety on a 1911, 2011 style gun, right? So if it's too easy to take off, then it's not that safe of a gun. You want it to be as designed. So then on the downward stroke, you don't want to have any interference with the lever in the frame. This one doesn't touch at all. Some of the EGW ones just crash right into it, and what you actually have to do is remove material from the bottom here. I've actually notched some, which I think is pretty cool, to where there's just a little notch that I machine in on this side to clear the frame. This one doesn't need it, but I'm not going to, you know, pick out 100 different parts and 100 different frames and make a 30-hour video about this. So when it's in its down position, the lobe itself should be touching the frame on the inside and stopping it, but it may have some interference from the lever and frame. You may have the shield part of the safety touching down here. You may need to relieve some of that. What really is your cue is that this point here clears this bearing surface here. So your slide is sliding along this, or if it's badly fitted, above it, but it should be sliding along this surface. And if this point is above this surface, then your slide is going to crash into that, and it's going to be terrible because you're going to lose material from a fairly expensive assembly of parts. And not that bad. You can remove material to where it all works, but you don't want it to be ugly, right? So as long as this sits below the bearing surface when this is in its down position, then it's fine. If it doesn't, and this is all the way down, and you know that there's no interference here, no interference here, then you may have to remove some material from the top right here. That's generally not the case. I've only had to do that on one gun, but it was absolutely necessary to do on that one gun. There was no other way around it. I didn't really care for having to do that, quite frankly, but I don't design all the parts. So that's essentially the gist of it. Let's get to how you're going to remove this material. So this is a vise on my inside bench. It's got leather jaws. Just clamp it down in here. You don't want this to get damaged. You want to grip it with some leather, some plastic, some soft jaws. If you don't have any leather jaws, you can cut up an old belt or go to a craft store and buy some leather. But you want it to be gripped in there, and then this will allow you to, file and remove material. You can pull it back out with this stable, right? Because you want a flat surface. I usually use this 10/8 block. It's pretty cool. Quite frankly, I've had other bench blocks for so long that when I finally bought one of these, the only thing I really do is use the safety fitting notch that's machined into it. This is a block of Delrin. It's pretty badass. You should get one. If you don't have a bench block of any type, get this one first. So I generally do that, and then this gives me, if I've got a gun with a safety fitted to it, I can actually pop it into here, do a depth measurement to this surface here, and then that could be my guide on fitting a new style of safety in to take place of the safety that's coming out of the gun. Just like kind of a little cheat code. It's very nice. All right. Ambi safety pickup. So there will be a different clip in here. This is my carry gun. It's just a Prodigy. On this one, I've got Ed Brown slim safeties that I've had to blend to the back of the gun on both sides. Rather irritating. You can't really tell unless you're a machinist, and it's pretty hard to pick out even then. You can really only tell by looking at the sort of interfering curves right here. So you've got a line going that way, a line going this way, and then a curve coming down, and it rounds over. In any case, on Ambi safeties, you want the two sides to fit together smoothly and effectively and securely before you do anything at all in terms of fitting. Because if the two sides don't go together very easily, you're going to have a hard time getting the safety in and out of the gun to fit it correctly. And that's not what you want. So an Ambi safety, typically we'll all have this tongue and groove set up like so. You want that interface to be smooth. You want it to fit together well. You don't want it to be loose or sloppy, right? This is what transfers the leverage from this side to this side, or this side to this side if you're left-handed. So if this is new, some of these new, when you push them together, are very, very tight. So you want to clean that up until it slips together just well and is essentially a perfect mechanism for transferring leverage. Just like at the beginning of the video, an Ambi safety, you want to put the left side safety lever into the gun, make sure it moves freely. You want to do that to the Ambi side, the right side of the gun lever, make sure it moves freely, fix any issues that may or may not, or that may cause them to not move freely, and then move on from there. Typically with an Ambi, you'll stick the right side lever in and use it to hold the beaver tail grip safety in and hold things in alignment while you install and remove this over and over to fit the fitting pad. If you screw up the fitting pad and you're a talented or skilled welder, you can weld the pad back up and cut it back down. It's not really a problem. You don't want to put too much heat into it. You definitely want to be using something with a lot of control, a TIG welder, or if you're really talented, a MIG welder, to just zap a blob on there, and then you can hand file it or machine it back to a normal looking shape and then fit it back to the gun. But in reality, you don't want to have to do that. You want to do this in a one and done by doing it carefully and methodically. I think that's it. And then we talk about fitting the right side of an ambi lever that will invariably have a section that protrudes into this recess in the frame right here. This is now very common. On a 1911, this would be built into a grip panel. Not everything is like this. I've got some Ed Brown safeties that use a special hammer pin. EGW has some of the same thing too, where you actually don't need that tab. There's a hammer pin with a protrusion and like a T-slot cut into the safety itself that does the retention. But on these style of guns where you've got the tab sticking off, this tab will oftentimes be too long, and you will have to actually cut it back to where it will fall into this groove with the slide off, right? So with the slide off, this can, you know, if I've got this section out, this could just like rotate out, pull right out. And so when you're letting this down into position, this tab, if it's way too long, will stop. It will hit way up here before it actually, because it can't get into the groove, right? So you'll have to remove material from there so that it'll slip down into this groove. And then that is your retention mechanism for that style of safety.